The name of the book is Through It All, and Twyla Salazar is our guest on Author's Corner this time around on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney, and she has such a powerful story and a way out for, I think, so many people, and some hope that I believe is already resonating with many people. But this book has a very, very powerful message. Twyla, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So as I said, you and I had a great off-air conversation talking about what happened, your journey from being a child and being in a dysfunctional home and how to deal with it and what you had to deal with. So let's start there. First of all, and thank you for being so vulnerable, because putting it in the book, like I said, helps so many people that are afraid to say anything. For you, I would imagine it was cathartic, but what was it like writing this book?
It was very emotional. We had a lot of breakdowns, and then the interviews with my kids were very emotional, but it also turned out to be pretty healing as well. You know, I had apologized to them for the things that they had gone through many times whenever I had given my testimony. But during the interviews of this book, we had a lot of breakdowns. So it was also a healing process.
I love that it was a healing process. So tell everybody that's listening your story. What happened? What was life like growing up?
Growing up was, at the time of being a child, I didn't really recognize how dysfunctional and abnormal it was, because we were kind of isolated. My parents divorced whenever I was 3, and my dad remarried quickly, and she was an alcoholic and just, did not like me much at all. So she took a lot of her wrath out on me. And at the age of 14, I had visited with my grandfather at his lake house, me and my 2 siblings. And that was the first time whenever the molestation happened. So from that point, after that, I was pretty uncontrollable, I guess, or rebellious maybe, because my father did not offer any protection after I, told what happened. And it was more like he gave me excuses for my grandfather's actions. So that started a very dysfunctional teenage path for me. I started ditching school. A lot of anger rose up inside of me. My stepmother would hit me quite often. And I got to a place to where I was swinging back. And so, but it actually kind of stopped her from hitting me anymore. At the age of 16, I purposely and intentionally got pregnant because I knew that was my way out of the house. So we were married I was 16 when we got married. The marriage lasted for 7 years, and I had 2 boys. And, I can say that they're both living for God as well right now too, even with everything that they went through. They're both saved also. But the marriage lasted for 7 years, and he was a good person. He never did anything bad. We just grew apart. I was more outgoing, and he was more of a homebody. So we divorced. And after that, I married a man that showed me a whole new world. His family had backing and finances, and I just wasn't used to that at all. So I was really taken in by all of that. But he was in law enforcement, and so he had a very traumatic episode with him, and he started drinking. And whenever the drinking started, then the dysfunction started. So once again, divorced after 7 years. And after that divorce, it just was chaos for years and years. Dysfunctional relationships, all the way up until I met the person that introduced me to a very bad drug. I was kind of naive about it even. I remember telling him the first time he used the drugs on me, I remember saying, don't let me get strung out on this stuff. And I think about that now, and you're telling a person that is already strung out not to let you get strung out. That was a pretty naive comment. So that opened up the door of crime because I did get strung out and we had to support that drug addiction. So for 3 years, I was in and out of jail. I was a week and days away from dying every time that I would be sent to jail or something. They would tell my dad another week and she'd be coming in a hearse. So I went through that drug addiction, and then finally the person that created that was put in prison, and I cleaned up. I didn't use that drug anymore, but I had street knowledge at that time. So I went from using drugs to selling drugs. So that came into more dysfunction and chaos. It's just a revolving circle. Once you get involved in that, it's just, it's kind of like a hamster on that hamster wheel. It just never stops.
And so the name of your book, I mean, is aptly so, Through It All. I mean, even in the very beginning, as you're talking about drugs, it's the chapter's called Do It, Everything Will Be Fine. And then you talk about, Mom, 2 Mexican men I've never met were here asking for you. I told them you weren't home. Don't let them in the house, you say. And then you knew they were members of the Mexican drug cartel. And as you said, you were being very honest, for whom I was selling drugs. Wow. So, and we'll let everybody read about that. And you were even in a safe house. How did you escape all of that?
Well, it was with being married to my second husband and him being in law enforcement. I kind of knew both sides of the law at that point. So being in the safe house, they moved me forward. An incident happened where the person that was over that safe house was arrested in Mexico. And so they contacted me and said, you can no longer, be a part of that, but we have something else for you to do. And that's why they were at the house that day. They were offering me to do something else for them. So that just took me in a little bit deeper. And we moved out of the safe house into another location, which was really bad. But then I started driving and bringing drugs in that way.
So when did it all change for you? How did you get out of this? How did you find the path to finding God and the big change?
After driving for them for 2 or 3 years, it was getting to a place to where they were saying, your next trip, we're going to take you in, show you this and that. And it was a lot of areas that, there would not have been no coming back from if that had happened. I would have seen and known way too much at that point. So on the last trip, whenever I did not listen to the instructions fully, and I was pulled over and they found them and etc. So a lot of the information I want people to read in the book too. But from that point, I went on the run. And during the time of being on the run, I met another person. Well, actually, I'd already known him. He was spying from me. And went on the run because I would not do what the police had asked me to do, because I already knew I wasn't going to do it. But once everybody reads the book, they will understand what I'm talking about. And I started having nightmares. I was on the run, and I was having nightmares about well, he wasn't my fiance at the time, but a guy that him and I were living together. And I was having nightmares that he was going into places and it was pitch dark and I could not find him. And with him, it was, true love. He's an amazing man. That's who I'm married to today. And so I remember just being so exhausted and being on the run. I got up in the middle of the night and just went to the front room, went to my knees and started praying. I was like, Lord, I am tired. I am done with this life. I don't want nothing happening to Michael. I don't want to drag him into this mess. I just poured my heart out. And so unusual that, I really didn't know him, but I knew enough about the Lord to know to hit my knees and go to praying. And the exact next day, we left. It was a no tolerance weekend. We left to take our roommate some marijuana because he had called and asked for it. At first, I wasn't going to go, but Michael's like, you need to get out of the house. And we left, and he was notorious for not wearing a seatbelt all the time. And sure enough, we passed the sheriff, and the sheriff recognized he didn't have the seatbelt on, so we were pulled over. And his license at that time was suspended. So when they went to asking me for my ID, I was fumbling around trying to act like I didn't have one. That did not work. So when they ran me, they found that I had warrants from the place where I had been arrested from, and took me into jail. And I was in the county jail for 2 or 3 weeks and requested to see the chapel. And finally, I was able to go. And whenever I was in the chapel, I said the sinner's prayer. And it was very powerful in there. It was, even they've made comments of how they hadn't had that kind of an experience, with a lot of the inmates with doing that. And so after receiving the Lord, I went back. I just threw myself into Bible studies, everything that they could give me, I took on. And I read all the time and I cried all the time. And then I was transferred to another jail. And I was like, okay, I'm not even in trouble there. So why are they sending me there? And all of this information is in the book, but it was a divine appointment. It was a God scheduling event. It's crazy. It was just like everything over my entire life. He has been there to protect me. Before I knew he was there protecting me. So I was transferred into this other county jail, and they said, there's your room there. And as I walked in, there was 4 other girls, and they only hold 2. And I knew that the one next to it only had 2. So I even asked the guard, are you sure? And she said, yes, that's where you're assigned. And as I'm walking in there with all of my, the mattress and et cetera that they give you, I recognized that there was nothing but Bibles and Bible study books everywhere. And I didn't say anything because you have to, be quiet and get familiar with your surroundings. So I politely asked where I could put my stuff down at. And they told me, and they were kind of looking at me. And the evening time came, and the girl that gave the Bible studies was like, okay, everybody gather around. We're about to start. And I kind of looked up from my Bible, and she said, do you want to join us? And I was like, yes, I do. And just started having Bible study in there, and just the miraculous was happening there every night. I mean, we were caught up in the glory cloud one night. It was amazing. But
So for
all of that.
so for you, let me stop you there. For you, Twyla, and you talk about this, and people can learn even more details in your book. It is a wild journey, like you say. Some of those details that you describe for us, which you talk about very, very much so throughout the book, and that makes sense through it all. Discovering God's grace and peace through abuse, violence, drugs, homelessness, legal and
Yes.
chaos battles, and finding the path to redemption. I mean, you do that, and then wow, leadership in a church, and
Yes.
gosh, jumped into real estate, and what a different life you have now. People who know
Oh,
you now have
right.
probably no idea. I mean, obviously, if they read your story, but what do you want people to walk away with, knowing what happened, all these things that happened to you, and how you got out of it, and look at your life now?
What I want them to know is I want the young mothers, single mothers, young women, I want them to know their value. I want them to see themselves the way Jesus sees them. They're a daughter of a Most High God. They don't have to resort to men for help. They don't have to resort to selling drugs. They don't have to get caught up in the things of the world on the streets, that they can call out to Jesus. And although I went through all of that before I finally called out to him, I hope and pray that this book will help them see, before they go through such a horrific trail and path that I went through, that they can call out to him and he will help them. He will be their source. He can stop this path. He can help get them off of that hamster wheel and put them into a path of redemption way before the crying comes up and the separation from my children. That was probably the most heartache ever. And every time I was sober enough to feel the heartache of my children being in 3 different locations with family members, the only way that you can get rid of that kind of pain is to go and do more drugs, because it will numb you. So my book is prayerfully will help, like I said, young mothers, single mothers going through that battle, trying to survive and support their kids, trying to find love in all the wrong places from the wrong men. Jesus is there. He loves them. He can provide all of that love that they need. He can provide a source of income without going this direction. He can provide security. He can do all these things. So
Wow.
that's what my book is about. That is my prayer.
That
I just
happens. Yeah. I mean, you've said it all. Pick up the book. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Through It All: Discovering God's Grace and Peace Through Abuse, Violence, Drugs, Homelessness, Legal and Chaos Battles, Then Finding a Path to Redemption. Twyla Salazar, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.